All right, Charlotte, great to see you. Thanks for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. I was thinking about it the other day. I was thinking how to introduce you, and it was like, we used to be colleagues, and I was thinking it was probably about roughly 4,000 years ago. So,
It was a while ago.
so it was a wee while ago. So there's quite a bit happened since then. Obviously, you've written a really cool book, which we'll talk about. But before we get into it, why don't you just give us a quick origin story?
So we did used to work together. Memory fades on some things unless you put your mind to exactly when and where, but it was in the TVNZ. Well, I was at TVNZ in Wellington originally. You were at TVNZ in Auckland. I came to work at TVNZ in Auckland after I had been travelling, and I reported a lot on the America's Cup, and you were deeply involved in the America's Cup.
Yeah, me and Jane.
And then, that's right. And then after that, I went up to Hong Kong, and you stayed on at TVNZ, and we probably had more limited contact after that, but we were both within the same organisation, on the same email chains, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So since I've caught up with you, you've written like a really, really, really cool book. The first thing I wanted to ask you about it was, you probably get sick of all these questions about writing books, but was how deliberately in the memoir style it is rather than the biography style. And did you choose that? Was that deliberate, or am I putting words into your mouth?
Well, first of all, thank you. That's really nice of you to say. It took me 3 years to write, so I did put a lot of time and effort into it. I think I tried to write it in the memoir style. I'm a big reader myself, and I have read a lot of memoirs. Probably didn't read that. Oh, I read a few when I was writing it. But I also didn't. What did you say? The memoir style compared to what journalists?
So sort of a biography style. It is an autobiography, but it's not a timeline necessarily. It's more interwoven around a period and events and yourself around that period.
That's right. Like it covers a 30-year span, so that's quite a chunk. But it's still 30 years. I'm now 53 years old, so it is just my adulthood. And I deliberately did that. I deliberately wrote a book about being a journalist. And it starts in 1995, which was the year I studied journalism. And my career as a journalist ended up being so formative in terms of turning me into the person I am today, that it made sense to write a book just centred on those years. And quite a lot happened in those years. If I tried to put more into it, it would have been a very long book.
Absolutely. I guess what I mean by it is that it's a very personal book. It's you're quite vulnerable in the book, in the telling of the story, and that I think that takes quite a bit of courage. How do you view that?
There's a lot in there that I'm uncomfortable with. There's a lot in there that I don't talk about even with good friends, and
Yep.
That's been a comment that a lot of friends have made, particularly newer friends in my life. Like I live in Sydney now, and I've lived
Yep.
in a lot of different places. So there are a lot of friends in Sydney who are starting to read it and go, gosh, I never, they didn't even know about this accident that was such a big part of my life, or I might have mentioned it fleetingly. But even close friends, there's a lot in there that I hadn't talked about. Some of the experience I'd shared with some particular people who were around me at that time in my life,
Yep.
Such as the Beijing experiences that are in there. Like really only the friends that were living there that were the closest to me knew about some of the experiences. And look, the reason I included so much that was personal, I guess I made a sacrifice because that wasn't my comfort zone. I didn't really want to talk about myself. I didn't know how much of myself I would put into it when I started writing. In fact, I didn't really know what I was going to write each day. And journalists spend, as you know, we spend so much time relying on other people to tell us their stories. And I figured that that if I was going to try and tell a story about my work, that the personal was so much a part of that always as well. So I was kind of incumbent on me to put it in.
Yeah, there's no spoiler alert here, but the book, starts pretty closely with a pretty significant event in your life, which was an accident. And I even think back to that time, and I don't mean any disrespect here, but it was kind of like, oh, Charlotte fell off a cliff. It was like, what do you mean Charlotte fell off a cliff? And it was kind of like, oh, and she's going to be okay. And it was kind of like, oh, okay. So the accident and the person you became after, what's the difference between before and after? Do you think, I'm sure it changed your view on the world and how you act and things like that. Did it make you, what's the word I'm looking at? Did it make you braver, or were you always reasonably driven?
I was pretty driven and brave, a bit too brave. I was a bit of a risk taker, and I look, it's not the same for everybody, and different personality types play into this. And I have one very good friend who said to me, if I was with you, you would never have been standing there on that cliff at that point. But I did take risks. I did in my 20s feel like I was invincible. I think that's quite a common thing when you're young. Yeah. And, we see this in our children and young people, and sometimes our past children, jumping off or going to jump off high places. And I'm like, don't do it. But of course you can't say that, because we all have to have our own experiences in life. But I was brave beforehand. I remained brave, but in different ways. I took my career as a journalist that transpired after that accident, working in Asia. I guess there was a bit of bravery involved in different circumstances there. But I'm quite nervous of cliffs and the edges of things now. And as I've got, I was a little bit after the accident, but as I've got older, more so. And I think that's maybe an age thing as well.
Oh, absolutely. And that's something we talk about quite a bit in the newsletter and the podcast, and maybe we'll get to that a bit more as we go along. But the bravery thing, and because I think about, when you went to Asia, there wasn't an Asia gig. It was, and I think I might have mentioned this to you before or recently, is that it's kind of the entrepreneurial drive that you showed to your reporting. I mean, it's kind of like there was no Asia gig. There is now, because I make an Asia gig, there is an Asia gig.
I don't think I thought of it. I really like your Substack, actually, which is why I was looking forward to this interview. And I know you've written about the entrepreneurial spirit, and I think there probably was an element of that, but I don't remember thinking of it as entrepreneurial. I just remember thinking of it as an idea that's time had come. And it really made a lot of sense to have a bureau in Asia. There were bureaus there wasn't one in the US at that time, but there was in London and Australia. And yet we're so much a big part of the Asia region that it made sense. And plus I had just spent a year, before I had that big accident, I had just spent a year travelling through Asia, backpacking, a lot of that on my own. And I'd been to, I think, most countries in Asia over those months, and just really, I loved the place, and I knew how fascinating it was. I knew that was in the days when we didn't have internet news. It was just starting to come online. But I'd get newspapers everywhere I was, and there were just so many fascinating stories, and stories about New Zealand and how it was relating to the region, even in the regional newspapers there. And so it just made complete sense. The bureau didn't last, but I think the idea still makes sense.
Oh, no, I absolutely agree. One of the things in the book that is really clear is how much you love the region. You really like the place, and particularly the stuff I found really interesting was the stuff around China and the time in China, because it was kind of like China. I guess it was because of the Olympics, so they were trying to open up to the Western world, and it was all very ambitious and outward looking. Whereas you look now and it feels like it's kind of gone back inward. Is that your sense?
It's definitely a much more restrictive place than it was in the lead up to the 2008 Olympics. And in 2001, when you host an Olympics, a lot of countries bid to host, and China, when it bid to host, promised that it would allow free access for journalists to report in the country, for foreign journalists. And so it really made an effort to make the country a lot more free than it had been. But that said, of course, there'd been the Tiananmen crackdown in 1989, but there was starting to be quite a lot of freedom in a lot of different aspects of life in China, not just in terms of reporting, but in terms of the art scene.
Yeah.
A lot of the art was really pushing boundaries of what might get on the wrong side of the censors in China, and there was a lot of there was the chat online. There was quite a lot. I mean, eventually the censors caught up and removed content, but there was a lot of conversation and chat going on, and in a country of 1.3 billion people, they were taking quite a long time to catch up and get crack down on some of the chat that was happening between people. So it really was an extremely exciting time there. It was a time, I think, of some optimism that the country would continue to open up after the 2008 Olympics. And of course the market was open, and countries had been building up their trade with China since 1979 when it opened up under Deng Xiaoping, and when it opened its economy. But it was really there was just so much going on, and at that time it was our fourth largest trading partner. Now it's by far our largest, and the largest for so many countries in the world. So it's continued to broaden in that respect. But it's in terms of its own people, that the President Xi Jinping now is very determined to maintain stability, and he does that by making sure that people don't step out of line.
Yeah, so I know you've been back recently. It's kind of like some of the technology that is making things more open in other parts of the world, maybe, but it is actually a tool in China to make it to close it slightly, if you know what I'm saying. It's kind of like it's more easy to surveil the 1 point however billion people there are there.
Yeah, I mean the surveillance is so sophisticated and so pervasive, and for someone who comes from a country like New Zealand, like we do, it's quite intrusive, and I mean even it was hard to show this in a video, but I tried to film driving through the streets of some of the cities for, I don't know, maybe you're driving for 4 minutes and you're literally every 10 seconds snapped. Yeah. And it's like you've been caught on a speed camera. It's that same sort of blinding flash if you're caught on a speed camera in New Zealand, and that's just normal, and people just get used to it. And you ask locals about it and they sort of shrug, and there's nothing they can do about it, and they don't necessarily like it. They don't necessarily say they don't like it, but they just consider it a fact of life. And the technology is, I mean, China's doing some incredible things with technology, as we know. Yeah. And also in the surveillance too, and facial recognition. Like you can get on trains and you don't need to show your tickets or any ID and on some of the trains, because they know who you are from mapping your face the moment you step into the train station or step through the barrier.
It's interesting because one of the things when I was reading the book, I was thinking about, like, for example, I can't remember her name, but the mother of somebody that died at Tiananmen Square.
Ding Zilin, yes. Right. And her son, Jiang.
Yeah, and I was kind of like, she was out there saying what she's saying, trying to get the government to recognise what happened. And I kept thinking when I was reading, it was like, that's really, really brave. But I also kept thinking, why don't they stop her? Which, I mean, I guess then maybe it's easier to, I don't know. Is it easier now or?
No, it's a good point. I mean, I know why they didn't stop her that particular year, and she said it in the story publicity. When I interviewed her. Well, it was publicity, but it was also because China had said that it was going to be open and it had made this pledge internationally. Then that was an area that they decided that they would allow the international media to interview her. So several journalists interviewed her at that time. Right. But again, it wasn't easy. Like they let us through. They knew exactly who we were. They there was big security at the gate, and we got a real grilling and things. But our story went to air without anybody checking it. And I suppose they knew to some extent, the authorities knew to some extent what she would say. Yeah. But other years she hasn't been allowed to speak to the media. And there are a cluster of mothers within that Tiananmen Mothers group has had hundreds of parent members, less and less now because they've died, but Ding Zilin is still alive. But she has been under surveillance her entire life, and she turns 90 this year. Wow. And she's remained brave, and she still puts her name to this petition asking for accountability, for someone to be held accountable for what happened. But the surveillance has got tighter and tighter, and now you really can't go in to interview these people. But I did see actually this year, just shortly before I went to China in January this year, and in December I saw that they have actually been allowed to gather privately, the Tiananmen parents, over the years. And this was the first year in many that they were not even allowed to gather privately. Wow.
One of the things, I guess, I mean, it's a universal truth, is that no matter where the country is, or no matter what the political system is, or people are people, and they love their kids. They want to, they just want agency, and they want to feel accomplished. And that really comes through in the book. Outside of and people can be generous no matter what the circumstances are. And you talked about some of those generosities afforded to you in the book. Which ones really stand out to you?
Oh, the mother in Sichuan after the massive earthquake that killed 88,000 people, and she clambered over the rubble to try and share with us the little bit of rice that she had. Yeah. But I mean, not only that, in the Rohingya camps, so the Rohingya are the Muslim minority in Myanmar who fled to Bangladesh after what the UN called genocide in 2017, and they had been fleeing to Bangladesh over the decades. But we would go into the homes of these refugees. Well, I went twice. So the first time they had absolutely nothing. But then the second time when we went back after a year, and the homes are just these shacks that, you could, it's a cyclone prone place, and you could blow them over with your breath almost. I mean, they were flimsy structures, but they were homes to 7-8 people, each little shelter. And even in there, they would try and give us like a Coca-Cola or an orange juice or something that they just had for if someone, maybe they had been expecting us, because they would never normally have that. They had nothing,
gone out of their way.
Food rations were so meagre, but yeah, so the generosity. I mean, sometimes you find that people who have the least to give are the most generous, and I think we find that in our own environments as well often.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. When I was thinking about speaking to you, one of the things I kept coming to mind was the way the media has changed, and there's lots of good things. Well, I talk about a lot of good things that have happened in media, with the rise of independent media, people able to do things themselves and whatnot. But what independent media is, it's really hard for independent media to do, is cover big stories like that, or go to places, or, I mean, I guess the current situation with the war in the Middle East is an example. Independent media can talk to each other, talk to people, but having people on the ground, boots on the ground, for want of a better term, is expensive and really hard. And I kind of feel that's kind of lacking in some of the, particularly regional media, like say New Zealand Europe's got people on the ground, America's got people on the ground. Do you get that same sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the proliferation and democratization of the media is a really great thing. And I think you have some fascinating writing and great thoughts, people sharing really interesting thinking, and whatever your area of interest is, you can find out some really interesting writing, and really good journalism and good analysis. But it is harder to get to the people who are being affected. often by these stories. And I mean, that even happens within, if you wanted to go and cover a story in Nelson, for example, I mean, that costs money as well. And you can do interviews, but you only see this much of a person, don't you?
Yeah, for sure.
Which is really good, but it's not quite the same. And so that definitely is an issue, because always, for every single news story that we ever have, it's always people at the centre.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the news story, absolutely. Isn't it? Even the political stories, they're all impacting people. And I suppose I do worry that the people's voice, I mean, as you say, it is being shared by these international news organisations that have that have resources to do it. But long may it continue, because unless we're actually exposed to what the people are saying about what they're experiencing, it's very hard to relate to it.
Yeah,
and I guess, I mean, that's partly why I wrote the book too, because even though these people had, the people in China that I write quite extensively about, it was quite a long time ago that I interviewed them.
Yep.
But many of them don't have a voice now. The Tibetans and the Uyghurs, the Muslim people from Xinjiang in China and the west of China, that they're not allowed to speak openly about the kind of things that they were able to tell us at that time. And so I guess I just wanted to put that on the record, that's what they said when they still could speak openly.
Yeah, I spoke to Jane Dent, who you know relatively recently, and I was trying to cajole her into talking to me, and it was kind of tough going. And the motivation in the end was the people that had helped her along the way. She wanted to give them a shout out. And I kind of feel that once again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it kind of feels like that in the book as well.
Yes, I did hear that Jane interview. I thought it was great, and that you had reluctantly got her to do it, and she did say that, and I think that's really moving. And often journalists, we're so busy in journalism and in newsrooms, and you lurch from one story to the next story to the next story, and it's a challenge getting your head around it. But we are impacted, aren't we, by the stories that we tell, and some more than others, and some really linger with us, and we don't forget these people. And it's not just if you're a journalist. I mean, you can be a teacher, and there are students you remember, or students, and there are teachers you remember, or doctors will remember patients, or whenever you see these really shining, these examples of what humans are capable of, and the compassion that people show, or the generosity, or whenever something really has an impact on you, you don't forget it. And so, I guess, and I mean, that doesn't have to be in a professional capacity, is it? That's just the people that we know in our lives. And sometimes you come across people and you still remember a joke that they told years and years later, and those people would never even know that, but they kind of form what then becomes you. Yeah.
So thinking about that, experiences shaping who you become and what you do next, or how it informs how you carry on your life. So clearly you went after, well, not after journalism, but you also went into working for some charities. Was that just a natural progression from the work you've been doing?
Sort of. I mean, I think the charity I really, really liked. I found it very rewarding work. I worked for UNICEF Australia, and then I worked for the Smith family, which is the largest children's education charity in Australia, and it runs a lot of educational support programs as well. I found that work really rewarding. When I actually made the original decision to leave journalism in 2017, I was quite exhausted with the relentlessness of journalism, but I'd also been doing a lot of shift work, and I knew that if I came, because I was living in Singapore then, working for the BBC, and I knew coming back to Australia, the shows that I loved were, the ABC was a place that I was interested in coming back to work in, but the shows that I loved, the hours are so punishing, and it was either, people do those early mornings for years and years, and they're amazing. But it disrupted my sleep, and I got sick of making that sacrifice. So I was looking for something else. I also wanted to see what life was like from the other side. I wanted to get a bit stuck into something longer term rather than just a different story every day, like sort of bigger projects. And I wanted some new skills, and I started looking around. And I did look at some other comms jobs, did consider other comms jobs. But then as soon as I heard about that UNICEF Australia job, it's like, and it was only a maternity cover originally, but that was like, oh, that's the job I want. Like, that's just the perfect match where I still have exposure to these areas that I'm really interested in, and plus, UNICEF just did such important work around the world with supporting children.
Yeah, one of the things I talk about in the newsletter and the podcast and stuff a lot is reinvention, but actually it's more often it's not reinvention, it's reversioning. You're not reversioning. You picked up a lot of skills along the way when you reach a certain age. You don't throw them out and go on to the next thing. You hopefully repurpose them into a new role. So what do you think being a journalist brought to those other roles that you took?
Well, they were mostly comms-related roles, so there was a lot of storytelling. With the Smith family, I was leading the media team, so it was pitching stories to journalists so that they would shine a light on what young people in Australia facing disadvantage were living through, and particularly during COVID and things. So it was very helpful knowing the angle that a journalist would be looking for, and that came relatively naturally because I'd done it for quite a long time. But journalism, again, it's about people, isn't it? And it's about that rapport that you have, that you're able to build with people, and just getting out there and talking to different people, and a curiosity for finding out about what's happening in their lives, what they're going through, how they're coping with it. I think that was helpful. And I mean, I think journalism sets you up for many. Journalists have gone on to so many different things. But thank goodness enough have stayed in journalism.
That's right.
It's good to have young people. It's fantastic having young people in journalism. And I know you also write about that too. Like the sweet spot is not just hearing from young people hearing from the old people and what they've got to share, but it's us learning from them.
I really like the phrase, I can't even remember where I picked it up, was young minds, old heads. It's kind of like combined is really good, but separated can be a bit random. You said at the start, and I kind of sensed that from you way back when, that you were quite a brave person anyway. Did you feel any sense of insecurity going into newer roles?
Yes, of course. Always. And I mean, I've pushed myself beyond that level of comfort my whole life. And that's been really hard. Every step, I mean, and it's still hard. And God knows how nervous I was writing a book. I mean, I wasn't nervous every day I sat down because I was hiding away in a room. But it's a very nerve-wracking thing putting it all, and not only nerve-wracking, but you wonder, like, why have I done this? I don't even like talking about any of this. And I still can't really give you a good answer to that. Except it was really to talk about these other stories. But and
I think that really comes through. I don't think that you shouldn't question yourself on that. It really does come through.
But yes, I mean, I found everything hard, all those things really hard. And at the BBC, I was working in the business team, and I'd do live crosses. I mean, I did a lot of producing, but I did some reporting as well, and I do live crosses for the Asia Business Report. And I mean, that was hard. And then, the political stories are hard, getting your head around it, and always you have to do it as a journalist on a daily basis to such tight deadlines. So that's really hard. Live reporting is really hard, and that terrified me. And even talking about the book has been something that I was thinking, how am I going to do that? But actually, surprisingly, I don't know if it's a middle-aged thing or what, a midlife thing. It hasn't been as hard as I expected when I did the very first interview about the book.
You mentioned right at the beginning about how, and I think it was, I can't remember exactly what you said, but it was a bit like things get harder as you get older, or you become more afraid. And I think it's a really important fact. You know, if you don't, I talk about this thing, elasticity. You need to remain elastic or you become brittle, yeah? And what seems to happen as you get older is you stop being elastic because you stop trying new things and stop doing new things, and you become brittle, yeah? So when something comes along, you break instead of stretch. But I think maybe, you know, the fact that you've done so many hard things as you've gone along kind of has set you up well with the book piece, I reckon.
Yeah, and I have always had I think I've always had an open mindset, and that's something that children at school get told, the importance of having an open, not a closed mindset. And over the years, the people I've loved working closely with the most are people with that open, yes, can do attitude. And I find it really hard working with people who put up barriers. And, you know, it's part of that elasticity, isn't it? And really, you know, like the world is so complicated. So I also, you know, there's so many grey areas. I find it hard to have very firm views about things like politics, religion.
Yeah.
You know, the world is so complex. But yeah, in terms of what did you say? Not reinvention, but reversioning. Yeah, reversioning. Having that elastic mindset's crucial, and being flexible and just like remaining flexible right up until. No,
till you can't anymore.
50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. I mean, yeah, maybe not physically, but well, as physically as much as possible. But certainly, like the mental elasticity of the brain, and the brain is just such an amazing thing, isn't it? And you know, you use it or you lose it, and
yeah, for sure.
Keep on practicing being flexible.
Yeah, I back to the book just quickly is I think. I think there's not a book in New Zealand at the moment that is not referenced to Paula Morris somehow. It feels like everybody that's involved in books has gone past her at some stage. So tell me a bit about the process around actually bringing it to life.
So I started writing without having a publisher. There was one publisher that I'd sort of vaguely talked to, who was non-committal. Once I started writing, I just wanted to keep on writing. Sort of felt this urge to keep on writing. But I was, again, to your point about, you know, pushing yourself, I was really doubtful about writing a book, and I wanted to explore how to do it as best I could, and started with a six Tuesday evenings. I was living in New Zealand at that time. It was during COVID, or the end of COVID, and going along to that only reinforced how much I didn't know. Like I'd forgotten from English, and I can't remember if we learnt this in English at school. I loved English at school, but I sort of said it to my children, who are now teenagers. Then they were sort of 10 and 12, and they were like, oh yeah, the hero's journey. So they know all that. They're taught all that at school now. Yeah. But I'd completely forgotten about that sort of thing, and the show Don't Tell, and I was sort of struggling to even get my head around it. And so really those writing courses were super helpful. I started doing the 1 over 6 Tuesday evenings, and then it wasn't enough. I needed more help. And I needed more help. And I looked around, because I also, you know, I like getting things done fast, and you can't get a book done fast. No. But I want...
Not a good book anyway.
Well, no, I suppose people do sort of... Oh, no, I mean, some people turn good books out fast, but certainly I couldn't. And then someone... Well, I always knew... I had known of this Masters of Creative Writing that Paula Morris does at Auckland University, but you have to do that in person, and I was not even in a position to apply because I lived in Sydney, and then I thought, oh, should I do a Sydney course? But actually I knew that the book I wanted to write was really... I had New Zealand readers in mind first. I mean, I hope finds readers in Australia too, and half my career has been in Australia. But but I really, I knew it had that New Zealand lens was important. And so, yes, I emailed Paula, and you never know when you email people, you don't know if they're going to write back. And she did write back, and she said, well, how about you do this 4 genres course, which was a stage 2 creative writing paper in 4 genres at Auckland Uni. But she was actually away. She was in Asia. She's has got I've not met Paula face to face, but I understand she's got quite a deep love of Asia as well.
Right.
And so she did some online lessons for us, but she also had designed the course, and she had some really great teachers back here, Selena Tusitala-Marsh and Ruby Porter, who took the course in person. So
right.
Yes, I learned from them too, and then just kind of experimented, and then kept reading. And look, there's so many resources. I mean, as you know, there's so many resources we can get now online, aren't there? Like, you can bring the world to you. And I listened to, I paid for a year's subscription to Masterclass, and I listened to Margaret Atwood's writing courses, and Salman Rushdie and Amy Tan. So it was like 3 people that they were all quite different, and they were like 10 lessons at maybe 40 minutes each, and they were really good as well. So you can do it without spending a lot of money.
Absolutely, we're kind of in that time where the thing is, I guess, if it was just knowledge though that was holding you back, we'd all have a 6-pack, be driving sports cars and whatnot, because there's plenty of knowledge. Knowledge isn't the problem; it's the execution. Ultimately, is actually, in your case, sitting down and writing a book and getting it done. I noticed at the end, when I think I was reading your bio at the end, it said, this is Charlotte Glennie's first book. It kind of left a question, are you going to be writing another one?
Oh, the publisher wrote that. Well, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a well, you might have gathered from the book that I'm slightly superstitious, and I believe that there's a superstition. There's a superstition among writers. Well, I think that it's often it's accepted that they will write another book, but they never say what it's going to be. So
right, all right, that's fair enough.
But because I'm new, I'm even nervous about saying I'll write another one. But I did love the process, and I mean, whatever happens, I really like telling people's stories. I realised that I realised in leaving journalism that I do miss journalism, and I miss telling. Well, I enjoy telling stories in whatever format. So I guess we'll see. I'll see.
All right. Wait up. I guess that's a good place to put a pin in it. I was now I may get this completely wrong, but I think there's a Chinese proverb or something along those lines that goes, "May you live in interesting times." And I think you lived in Asia in pretty interesting times and reported on it in a really cool way. So well done. I really enjoyed the book, and it's nice to catch up again.
Oh, thanks, Alan. It's a real pleasure, and I look forward to continuing to read. What you write as well, because I think this entrepreneurial side of journalism that you're tackling, it's not easy, is it? But it's I'm under no illusions about that. But there's people that really enjoying the content, and I mean, I think that's the other thing too, is that everybody that bothers to write, and certainly from the book, everyone that every little message or something that people send in and say, it's good. Like it buoys you, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It makes a big difference, shouting into the void.
Yeah.
All right, Charlotte, you take care. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Alan.